Right, sorry for keeping everyone waiting. I am Eden Morrison. I am a fourth year creative sound production student at Abate, and I want you to think about the different ways that you engage with video games. So I think that you engage with video games in four main ways. You use your eyes, you use your thumbs, you use your brains, and finally you use your ears. So first up, you've got your eyes, you've got the graphics. Graphics are the kings, the graphics arms race, the endless push upwards towards greater graphical fidelity, the console wars, Xbox One versus PS4. It was a deciding factor for many people buying this new generation console. There's the so-called PC master race, wielding triple titaned monsters and 4K displays, trying to squeeze out those few extra frames per second. Next up, you've got our thumbs, and that is a PS2 controller wielded by Andre the Giant, as far as I can tell. So gameplay, thinking with portals, capturing the flag, going raiding, crushing candy, all these examples of gameplay. So without it, we make films, kind of pretty much, visual, audio, just kind of firing our audiences down the barrel of linear narrative. Gameplay, the thing that makes our medium what it is. Next up, we've got our brain, speaking of narrative. We craft worlds. We allow people to live out their fantasies, walk miles in shoes that they'd never otherwise be able to walk in. We've got the soldier fighting in wars, the Dovahkiin slaying dragons, and even, one of my favourites, a belligerent orange square falling in love with a pink rectangle. And finally, our ears, the majestic sound. No, wait, sorry. Our ears, sound, which is pretty much just footsteps and backing track, right? No, it is not. Unfortunately, in parts of the industry, that is what people think of when they think video game sound. From folders full of generic effects to royalty-free one-size-fits-all library music, the kind of amount of time, effort, and money put into sound seems to be somewhat less than the rest of the areas of the industry. And I want you to think about this for a second. Other than like a rumble controller, it's like some haptic feedback, sound is 50% of the sensory feedback that you get from games. You've got the things you see on the screen, and you've got the sounds in your ears, other than the rumble pack. So why is sound kind of, not neglected, but, neglected in this way? Well, I can see why. It's a lot easier to spot reused and kind of generic visual assets than it is sound assets. I mean, you can see our crowd there. It's all cut and paste. Admittedly, this is kind of for space. It's still done. That's fine. But you'll very rarely see visual assets repeated from game to game. Whereas I can guarantee you that if you've watched films or played games for any kind of length of time, that you will probably have heard every single one of these screams. It might be really loud. I apologise. Right, my favourite was the one before last. It's got a kind of guttural one, I like it. And the sixth one, the one labelled Wilhelm, is so ubiquitous that in the film industry it's kind of become a bit of a running joke. Sound artists try and sneak it into huge films, like Pixar films, just to see if anyone will notice. And now you all will. And it will ruin films for you, so I apologise. But someone else ruined it for me, so, that's what you get. So what do we do about this in games? Well, I'm of the opinion that we should go bespoke. Now, for small companies, I understand that the kind of off-the-rack options provided by lots of companies where you can kind of get sound fonts and that kind of thing, which are kind of pre-made banks of sound effects and music, are attractive. I mean, they're cheap, they're often really very high quality, and they're kind of readily available for pretty much anything that you can think of. Employing people is expensive, and these kind of more generic options can be appealing. But let me ask you this. Would you do the same for the rest of your game? Would you take a bunch of pre-made generic assets and scripts bought from a store, assemble them, and then release that to the public? Well, if you would, and you can, and you're satisfied by that, crack on. You can probably make a lot of money out of it if you do it in a clever way. But I personally believe that games could be better than that. So how should sound sound? Well, what I'm going to try and do now is show you what good games can sound like and try and convince you that good sound really does make a crucial difference. that it's not just about dropping in some footsteps in a backing track, that game sound can be more. Now, the problem is that in many cases, when audio is done well, you don't really notice it. It just underscores the whole experience. And so what I'm going to do, instead of kind of continuing to rant in your faces, is show you 3 examples of games where, to me, audio really stands out. At this point, it's worth noting that I haven't chosen any games like audio games like Res or Audio Surf or Guitar Hero. They're all really good examples of audio in games, but I want to show how audio can be used in kind of more traditional styles of games. So first up, we're going to look at Fez, which is one of my favourite games. It's a really, really good example of how to incorporate music into level design. Music is really integrated into the entire level. The platforms appear when the notes in the music are triggered, and the kind of delay after the notes are triggered gives the player an indication of when they need to jump to the next platform. Also there's that bit at the end where you have to jump up straight up the levels, which I think is really, really brilliant, because you've got a musical scale going upwards, it's kind of uplifting, and it's very, very closely matching what it is the player is actually doing at the time. So, next up, we've got Portal 2, which is a brilliant example of adaptive audio. Try and talk over this one a little bit. With each laser, as it goes to the target, you get another layer of audio as you go. So. Here we've got the repulsion gel. So every time you bounce, you get a nice little arpeggio, kind of sounds bouncy, it goes up and down. Beautiful. Same idea with the propulsion gel. So with the faith plates, you get kind of glitchy little melodies and rhythms as you bounce off them. So it's important to note that all of these kind of little touches, all of these little additional layers are synced with the music that's in the background. And I think that's really important because it makes it feel as though it's not just a sound effect that's being played, it's part of the experience that you, the player, kind of creates as they progress through the game. And it really helps give the player kind of feedback for their actions and what they're doing. So the last one is a little bit different. It's Deus Ex Human Revolution. And so when I mentioned before about sound and music underscoring experience, I think this is a really beautiful example of this. I chose it because the soundtrack just fits the aesthetic of the game so well and really ties in with all of the themes of the game. So yeah, Deus Ex Human Revolution. Abandoned streets, and it's all kind of electronic, but it's familiar, which I think is a big part of what they were trying to go for with the game. That kind of lonely, wistful vocal almost justifies how empty the streets are, which could very well be a technical concern, because character models have lots and lots of polys, take a lot of processing power. So you've got this kind of empty streets, and the music really kind of backs that up and reinforces that point. And now you've got the limb clinic, which is like a medical facility for people who haven't played the game. You go in there and get your kind of biomechanical upgrades upgraded. So it's kind of, yeah, I'll let the music speak for itself.
Would you say the police were openly violent? But there was violence, right? The police say anesthesia before. Is it really stuck in hard machine? You know it sounds like here, but do it every day sometimes. It gets done through an IV needle. You'll be asked to counteract.
So you've got this almost kind of funereal but kind of synthesized piece of music that really kind of ties in with the themes of the game, because it's all about kind of transhumanism and whether we should kind of use these implants and augmentations to better ourselves. So in the place where you receive these implants and augmentations, there's a kind of sense of almost foreboding about kind of should we do this, shouldn't we do this, but it's also got that kind of choral religious element to it, which is one of the other kind of big themes of the game, kind of fighting against this transhumanism. These are just a few examples of the many games with truly exemplary audio. There are absolutely loads, but looking at these three specifically, we can ask, well, what makes these games sound good? I mean, I've kind of touched on a few things here, but I don't really have time to go into absolutely everything. And also from a kind of development standpoint, what did the developers do to make these games sound good? What do these games have in common in that respect? Well, firstly, they had sound people on their teams. I think personally this is massively important. If you contract someone in and they're working on 4 other different projects at the same time, which is often the case, that's kind of pretty much how sound in the video games industry works. It's all kind of contract work, except for kind of really big companies. If you've got them contracted in working on, say, 4 other projects at the same time, how are they going to immerse themselves, heart and soul, into the piece of art that you're trying to create? Secondly, these games had sound people on board for a lot longer than is typically the case for a lot of game developers. The composers and sound designers had input into the games, collaborating with the designers and the artists and the programmers, not just being kind of rushed in towards the end of the production cycle, as is often the case. Like, lots of developers do this, and I think it's a bit of a shame because you're missing an opportunity to have the creative collaboration with people who are providing half of the sensory feedback from your game. And lastly, but most importantly, they cared. They realised that you cannot have an excellent game without excellent audio. Unless you engage the eyes, the thumbs, the brain, and the ears, you'll never truly reach the unique excellence that our medium can offer. Thank you very much.